I'm kind of glad that the music continues to like work out for this, but I can't take any credit for the music. The music was entirely provided. Oh crap, did I? Oh, no, everything's fine. Ha, never mind. Never mind. I almost did a dumb thing, but I did not. I can't take credit for the music. It was all Kate. Kate was the one who actually came up with this entire playlist. And I'm just living in her world now. I think is kind of what I sort of have to accept in all facets of my life, but I'm honestly completely okay with this. I saw the turtle, I saw Greyman, I saw Avatar of Cain. Hopefully we'll get some other people in here, but for now, I just have to make sure that I've got my scene set up. Hey, there's Weirdness. Oh, that's a great emote. Oh, Weirdness. Oh, I'm so jealous of that emote right now. The peak emote. That's amazing. Here and just stealthy. Well, I hear you on stealthy. I'm going to pull all of the things that I have set up here because today is going to be a bit of a day. Weirdness is a collector of many fine emotes. That makes a lot of sense. Today we're actually going to be diving into part of my design process. I'm totally down to discuss any old random RPG things. And of course, if you have any RPG questions, then I do urge you to toss in an !Q. Oh, I can actually start that on the bot. Let's go to timers and question. There we are. So if you do have any questions that you burningly want to have answered, we can throw it up in here. But, oh, we actually even have something in here. Is this old or new? This looks like it's probably old. You know, but I'm going to throw it up there anyway, because why not? The turtle says, one thing that has caught my eye is that this game is set only a few years after Rokugan was formed, when base it's almost a millennia after. Personally, I see that this could have huge ramifications. Do you feel like this will affect the setting? Because the players are pretty much the second generation of this new order. That isn't the implication. The implication is that the realm has been established for some time. So it's not that they're second generation. I'm not sure why that came up. Did I give that impression? Did I outright say it? Now I'm contradicting myself. I have no idea. But no, the Neo Rokugan is intended to be a game that sort of has been taking place in a universe that's established, as opposed to a universe that's only just being created. Or at least that was my intent. I'm not sure whether other people may have changed their minds about such things. Gotta turn this music down to my earphones because it is blasting. But that's okay. That's all right. So, in case you were not aware, Legend of the Five Rings has, in its big old book right here, L5R has in its book a character creation that is a little bit unlike what you would find in other games. You actually have 20 questions that you're supposed to answer. So why don't we go and have a look at that? And while we're having a look at that, we're going to see when we run the players through character creation, they're going to encounter things that aren't going to necessarily jive with the setting that we're looking at. So what changes are we going to have to make? And luckily, we do have the ability to check that out. So if we go in here, we do have the 20 questions worksheet all here and all ready to have a look at. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go through each of these 20 questions that you see here. Some of them, they'll be standard and we won't have to make any changes. Some of them, however, it is going to mean that we're going to have to do a little bit of a deeper dive. what do those questions mean? And as a result, we're also going to have to see what changes we're going to have to make, or what we're going to have to already establish before the players start. Because one of the things about this setting, and one of the things about kind of porting any system to a different kind of setting, is that a lot of it is going to come down to kind of a mutual understanding between the players, the storyteller, and in this case, even the audience. We're going to have to know, okay, so we have a general idea how things work, but I'm not about to start writing a whole book that's, that size, a book of 336 pages for one game that we're not even sure if the campaign's going to work out or not, right? We don't know whether this is going to be the sort of thing that will really kind of capture our imaginations, and we'll be going really hard on this for 100 plus episodes, but we also don't know whether we're going to be coming up against something that is, maybe we'll play for like 10 or 15 episodes. Brain Torn Out, it's !Q and a space, not QUEUE. It's just the letter Q. So it'll look like this. So you want to throw the !Q in front of your question, and then we'll be able to toss it up on stream. Hey, hopefully you can just copy paste it. If not, I can. Hey, Kung Fu Fenders. It is good to see you. I realize that that is quite confusing. I totally should have just made that clear, because !QUEUE would make a lot of sense, because you are adding it into the queue. So, I'm kind of done. You like this Neo Rokugan banner? I appreciate that. This particular banner was actually one that we kind of came up with a little while ago. And right now we kind of are using it as inspiration for the other graphics assets that we're going to be making. So there we go. So Brain Torn Out, we're actually going to, we'll start with you. So we're going to step away from the document for a second, and let's have a look. I've recently joined a game where I play a drow-adjacent character, and I want to pull off a bit of a surprise with the players. I practiced plenty with several English to Undercommon translators, and thanks to my very unique accent, a mix of Slavic, Scottish, and Middle Eastern, I can make it sound very weird. However, I want to make it sound a bit more harsh. Do you have any tips on making a language sound more harsh or off-putting? So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that with a language. The first is harsh or off-putting in terms of language. You can see, depending on the sort of sounds that language makes. English, for instance, as a language, is not incredibly harsh. We don't use a ton of hard, plosive consonants at the starts of words, and we don't have anything that kind of requires either glottal stops or glottal fries. So what do I mean by that? So a glottal stop is more kind of in common with languages where you kind of swallow the end of it, like the cut at the back, and fry involves really resonating into the throat itself. So if you speak both Hebrew and Russian, you absolutely do that. So one of the ways that you can do it is you can add the guttural sounds. Just be very careful that you don't completely fry your vocal cords. There's a certain amount of kind of grumbling and rumbling that you can add, but if you're not warmed up, then you do risk causing some damage to your vocal cords, or at the very least making it very uncomfortable for you to talk. The other thing that you can do is, if you're using a fictional language, a fictional language is honestly one of the more difficult things to do. Hi, the turtle. a fictional language, there's reasons why there's only a few people in the world who actually make it as their living to come up with fictional languages. Things like Dothraki for Game of Thrones, or Klingon for Star Trek, or any number of even AI sounds. It can be difficult to make something sound like a language. One of the things that I'd recommend is you can look up on YouTube what other people think English sounds like. And it's the sort of thing that if you're trying to imitate a language that you don't speak, there's certain things that you can kind of start to do because you're like, oh, that sort of sounds Russian. That sounds Mandarin. That sounds Spanish, not Mexican. Mexican's not a language. But the one of the things that I will say is that when people copy English, they're often not harsh. So what I'd recommend is not only just, get the resonance of your voice way back or way down. You can put the resonance in your chest as well, which is really going to deepen and add more bass to your voice. If you're playing this game online, you can consider putting the microphone really close to your mouth. This is going to give what's called the proximity effect, and it's going to deepen the bass response from your speaking voice. Now, part of it is going to depend on your microphone, but you'll also notice that if I put myself like really like up in here, then I'm also going to be, my plosives may end up affecting the microphone as well. You could even try, if you wanted to, you could try putting the microphone directly up to your chest, which is really going to pick up more of your bass response, as long as you're putting the resonance of your voice down there. But it also depends on the microphone, and it may not necessarily come out the way that you'd want to. Ellie Spot is going to mention something, because Ellie Spot's got insider information, which I think can be useful. And I really hope that I'm pronouncing this the way that it's meant to be pronounced, because I'm never sure if it's Orangija, but I assume it's Orangia. Wants to add that what makes a language sound harsh is culturally dependent. Many Western Europeans and Americans think Russian sounds harsh. Russians don't think Russian sounds harsh. Absolutely. In much the same way that other people may think that English sounds soft, but we don't necessarily feel that way. It's part of the reason why in our swearing language, our swearing language involves a lot of hard sounds and really kind of a rough. So the idea of fuck, the is the F sound, while soft in and of itself, kind of primes for a real attack on the end of the word. Shit, same thing. It's ending in a hard T, but then you can get onto some of the other words that are harder, some of which I won't actually repeat here, and they really lay into that explosive sound. So it's not always just about the language or the culture. It can be very specifically that the culture is appropriating elements that are rough. A German curse word, Scheiße, which I am probably absolutely mispronouncing, doesn't involve any hard consonants or hard sounds at all. But in English, those are kind of important, right? Have a look at the C word that Australians can throw around, but I cannot. But it is an interesting question when playing around with language. B's, P's, K's, T's, and rougher sounds in the back of the throat will sometimes work, but oftentimes it's really going to be coming down to what you're saying. Which is kind of like the last point I was going to make. So in fact, now I'm going to shift to the point made earlier. Cultural words kind of matter. What you are saying matters. It's one thing to say, I'm going to kill you. It's another thing to say, I'm going to cut your throat. And it's another thing to describe in glorious detail what you would do before and after the actual act of killing. And these things can really kind of put a notch in someone's head about somebody's Avatar of Cain. Is there a problem with chat? Like, are we experiencing issues? It's on your end. Okay, never mind. Because I can see chat. It often depends on the content. I have realized that when I choose a voice for a character, if I really want to make it sound harsh or off-putting, it's really coming down to what I'm saying as opposed to how I'm saying it. And also, I will freely admit that in the rare occasions when I use a fictional language in the context of a role-playing game, I often will have cheat sheets. Because there's two problems when we come up with when we come up with a language on the fly. The first is we tend to shift back to the language that we want to speak, and we start using those words instead. And the second is we tend to repeat things, but not in the way that you would repeat a normal word. If I use a word often enough, it's probably because I'm speaking about a specific subject, and the same noun or the same verb or the same adjective just keeps coming up in my speech. But if you're faking it, then oftentimes you just fall back on patterns, and it makes it sound like somebody is repeating themselves. So if I start being like, Ogoyola? Haseko no baga? Kapatota. I guess I don't know. Like, the problem is that my cadence stops changing. You'll notice that at that point I went da 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 da, and that's not necessarily going to sound interesting for other people who are listening if I'm trying to come up with a fake language. It's going to end up becoming a drone, and drones mean that people check out, and when people check out, they're not listening to you anymore. There also can be some amount of frustration with somebody if they don't want to start trying to determine your emotional state. If that's kind of what you're going for. Oftentimes when you make a character struggle, players are interested. Make a player struggle and they start checking out. So just be aware of that. So instead, what I've done in the past is I'll go onto some kind of translator, any sort of translator that I can find. And if I type in something like, welcome to the clinic, how can I help you? When I click on translate, it'll give me something like Mashka Chevisov. And that's giving me a little bit more to work with, because I can also sort of understand that as much as the translator isn't going to be great, it is going to give me something that I can focus on easily so that I can put my effort into something else. Your brain is capable of, say if your brain is capable of 100% of its effort level, the more effort that you have to spend on coming up or making up new words is the less effort that you're going to be able to do on things like emoting, considering the story, paying attention to the rest of your group, thinking about how much you really want to have that third glass of Mountain Dew, all of those sort of things. So, yeah. So Brain Turnout, you were looking up on our voice acting about... a big point was to try to avoid those patterns. It's a lot of it comes down to what is going to be acceptable at your table and how much of this you're interested in putting into it. Avoid repetitive patterns. Understand that even if somebody is harsh, they still modulate their tone. Somebody who always speaks in an angry tone of voice is seen as one note. And maybe that's what you're going for, but I doubt it. Most characters tend to not spend 900% of their time angry or ready to kill something. So that's what I'd recommend. Weirdness points out, and I think you're probably correct. I was just watching an anime with a made-up language in it, and it just sounds like reverse speak Japanese. I don't even speak Japanese, but it was obvious the stress was in all the wrong parts of words. Yep. Lots of people will do that. Sometimes they'll do that because they're trying to mess with you a little bit, or they're trying to slip in Easter eggs. But oftentimes it's just because it's just fast. It's just fast to do. But if I wanted to, say go for something to make yourself sound harsh, think about the words that you're going to use and consider speaking in English or whatever language you're going to be playing in. But modify instead the choice of words that you'd use and their tone as opposed to making up the language itself. And if you are, so you say here, I'm not going for angry constantly. I'm going for the language itself sounds like he's going to murder me with a fork, despite him asking where the tavern is. So there is going to be something that I'm going to warn you against. And I'm not trying to say that this is definitely what you were going for, but it is something that I have seen in games. If you try this, there's a chance that it's going to work out great and you'll be able to keep going with it and everyone's going to have a great time with it. Yahtzee. There's also a chance that you're going to do it. Everyone's going to be amused once. And then after that, people are going to get sick of it. It's okay. No, that's correct. It was weird. I was just like, I didn't anticipate that particular music shift right then. I have done this. I have been guilty of this. I have been in a situation where while playing, I thought like, oh, I'm going to come up with this really interesting verbal tick that I'll be able to use to identify this character. And then people just get really sick of it. And I put a lot of work into it. So, it's a tricky thing. So, when you say, hey, 36, when you say, if it doesn't work, you'll drop it instantly, you can play around with it for a bit. My recommendation is that you can also start something, do it once, and then basically that sets the tone. And then afterwards, you don't have to keep doing it. So if you kind of come in and you come out with like, and people are like, whoa, okay, whatever. And then you swap over to the language that you're supposed to be playing in, and you get into that, they'll remember that you started with that super angry, super harsh, guttural language, and that'll flavor how they see your character from then on. And you might even try that as sort of like coming up with 4 or 5 keywords like hello, goodbye, I love you, I hate you, watch out, right? If you come up with just those 5 words and you remember those, so every time you meet somebody, you're like, Junta! And then whenever you're leaving, you're just like, Hech! Maybe that'll be enough. Every other thing that you can say can be in the language that you're most comfortable speaking in. But people will still sort of see that as, oh, yeah, this person speaks another language, and that language can be pretty harsh. Was that Klingon? What I was just speaking? No. No, that was not Klingon. Or at least I don't think it was Klingon. Roger Twy says, as much as people like show, don't tell, sometimes I'm better off just telling my players what they're hearing, has been my experience. Absolutely. And one of the ways that this can actually work out is if you want somebody to be speaking, you want to make it clear that they're from another location. So you say they're speaking in in a different accent. Maybe you can even say they're speaking in a harsh accent or in a smooth accent or an accent from a particular location. If it's a game world that doesn't necessarily have a real world application, you can use another land from there. Like if I was in Exalted, I could say, an accent that really identifies them as from someone from the South, and then just speak normally. And the reason why is because accent work can be a lot of fun. And as I think I've said several times on here, your accent isn't going to ever be perfect to all ears because people will assume that you're trying to do something that they're waiting to listen for, right? If you say, okay, I'm going to start speaking in a British accent, and you start imitating, say, your grandfather. Maybe your grandfather grew up in the United Kingdom. imitate your grandfather, maybe you'll do it perfectly, but other people will say, well, that's not an English accent. And it's because your grandfather might have lived in Liverpool, London. He spent 3 years in France and then he moved over to Iowa. His accent's going to change depending on who he's around and what he's exposed to. And the same with everyone else. But it can be very distracting for somebody to listen to an accent from somebody who's clearly trying to imitate one and it isn't working out. Partially because, again, with that 100% effort in the brain, if you're devoting 50% of your effort to just being like, how do I speak in this accent? You're not spending as much time actually playing the game. And that's noticeable. And also for some people, they may find it distracting or offensive to hear you speak in a way that isn't your natural tone. So oftentimes it's easier to just say, I'm going to speak in this accent, or my character speaks in this accent, and that's all you need to do with it. If you are good at accents, go for it. Or if you don't give a fuck and you just want to try and practice, also go for it. No one says you have to be perfect. If your players ask you to stop, try to figure out why. If they're asking you to stop just because it's like the first 15 seconds of you doing it and you have yet to like catch the rhythm, like they can fuck off. But if they're asking you to stop because honestly, it's getting pretty difficult for them to pay any attention because you're absolutely butchering it, you can consider stopping. I have been guilty of testing out an accent which I have not practiced or have not even heard recently and just been like, you know what, screw it. That's how this person talks. But I've also been guilty of doing an accent that I thought that I had down, didn't, or hadn't practiced recently, and then suffered my own consequences where I feel embarrassed. That's life. It's okay. We don't have to worry about it too much. But I do recommend to people who are a bit shy or people who haven't worked with accents before, just consider that if you are doing an accent and other people don't like it, it can be very damaging to bust it out and then to have everyone else at your table kind of run up to you and say, oh God, your accent sucks. And they start laughing at you because the natural reaction for some people when they hear that is not you're out of practice with this accent. It's you suck. Your acting sucks. Your performance sucks. Your speaking sucks. You should never try this again. And maybe that's not what you want to get out of a role-playing session. Try streaming your games. You start getting messages from people who are like, this game that you played 5 years ago, I noticed something and you got it wrong. And you're just like, but at any rate, Brain Turnout says, pretty good tips. I need to keep on practicing, but I'm starting to settle on a pretty good sound. Excellent. And practicing means that you're going to feel better about it and you won't take up as much of that brain processing power when you're getting ready to doing it. It does sound like a Metal Scream toned down half the time, but I keep the ginger lemon tea on hand. Yep, just be careful. And if you feel or if you experience pain, stop. Don't make the mistake of blowing your vocal cords. I'm not even ready to do certain things unless I've done vocal warm-ups beforehand. And I often don't have time to do vocal warm-ups before a stream. So don't push yourself too hard if it means that you are at risk of completely screwing over your voice. That'll be bad. The Turtle says, I remember once I once said a Rat King spirit in Werewolf had a Boston accent. Me even saying he had it was enough for people to love it. I can't do a Boston accent for the life of me. Yep, sometimes it's all in the description, right? And sometimes it's not. Brain Torn Out, I bet you have more than 2 accents. A lot of it comes down to also, there's accents and there's dialects, right? Dialect being the word choices that you would choose, and accents being how you pronounce words themselves. But like, there's also, you know, there's a lot that you can kind of play around with just in terms of the tone of your voice, that people kind of perceive as a different tone, even if it isn't a different accent entirely. And I will take this point to remind everybody once again that you have an accent. I don't care where you live. I don't care what language you speak. You have an accent, you have a dialect. And just because it is perhaps the one that is most common in your area, does not mean that just because you have that, it doesn't mean that you do not have one yourself just because it's common. Your accent is, maybe you have a standard American accent or a standard British accent, which sometimes some people call received pronunciation, but that's actually something else because there isn't really a standard British accent. These are made up accents. They're completely fabricated. They're fabricated because they have to be, because nobody has a perfect accent. So, and there is also no right or wrong accent. If you speak with a Scottish brogue and somebody else comes along and they speak with a Texas twang, it's all good. Nobody is more right than the other one. And if English isn't your first language and it is tinged with the language learning that you've come up from another language as your mother tongue, it doesn't mean that your accent is wrong either. Nobody has a goddamn monopoly on it. It always amuses me when somebody says I don't have an accent, because most of the time when I hear somebody say that, they're American, and I'm like, where do you think your language come from? So, it is not that Americans are the, like, I'm not trying to paint Americans as dumb here. It's just that we've learned that because there's an accent called the standard American accent, some people believe that they have it. Also, most of the time, they don't. They think they have it, but they don't. We originated the language, dear. I mean, it's a big deal also in Quebec. The Quebec French accent, which incidentally also, there isn't just one. If you say a Canadian accent, I don't actually know what you mean. Accents tend to be about geography and politics and culture, and not necessarily specifically like, oh, I live in this country and therefore I have it. Canada's a huge country. We don't have a lot of people, but we have a lot of space. So somebody who speaks in Vancouver is not going to sound as somebody who speaks in Medicine Hat, or somebody who speaks in Alert, or somebody who speaks in Montreal. But the Quebecois accent is looked down upon in France. It is seen as rural. It is seen as bumpkin. And there are language scholars out there who believe that the Quebec accent is actually how French nobility spoke during the time that Quebec was being colonized. And because it was detached from the European mainland, the language stopped changing, whereas the language kept changing in France, connected as it was to all the other cultures that were around. So there are some who believe that the Quebecois accent is actually closer to what French nobility sounded like back in the day. Medicine Hat is a city, Kung Fu Fenris, one of the wonderful city names in Canada, along with Moose Jaw. Moose Jaw and Medicine Hat are two of my favorite Canadian city names. And the turtle also says, this is totally not about L5R, but I don't really care. The turtle says, my accent changes by who I am talking to. I lived in the southern US for half my life. I don't always use my southern accent, but if I speak to someone who has a southern accent, I slip back into my southern accent. Yep, absolutely. I had a good friend of mine, whenever she visited the States, she'd go to upstate New York, she'd come back and she would start adopting very heavy, like, New England accents. Specifically here, when we're referring to the footwear that you put on before you go outside in the snow, they're called boots. And she would call them boots. But then she'd go to the States, come back, and all of a sudden they were boots. Ew-ts, as opposed to oots. And even words like outside, which I will say, naturally, if I try to say it, I'll probably say outside. Oh, as opposed to ow. And that's a difference in my accent as well. I do have to be able to recognize those sorts of things, because if you want to get a role, for instance, if you're trying to go for a voice role, speaking in an accent that isn't a standard American places you sometimes. And sometimes people just don't want characters like that. The thing that really disappoints me, though, is that there are people who have lovely, lovely English accents, or accents when they're speaking English from any number of places, and then there's just seen as nope, no good, because it's clear that it's not their mother tongue, even if they speak English perfectly. And I find that that's a shame, because especially I have friends who are French Canadian who can speak English perfectly, and their accents are beautiful. Like, when they speak English, it sounds wonderful. But then there's this sort of thing where, oh, well, you don't hit your THs properly, and so therefore we can't use you. And I'm like, not everybody has to speak perfectly at all times. Whatever. I digress. But let's hopefully that answers some of your question. I realize I just spent the first 35 minutes on this, because why not? But at any rate, we don't even speak English proper here, and here is England. Yeah, nowhere actually has a monopoly on speaking things correctly. But it's also your dialect and your accent can also place you and cause prejudice just based on your real life, which is why a lot of people say I'm trying to shed my accent. Somebody who speaks, especially in certain areas, will try specifically to shed their accent because it makes them appear less intelligent or less socially adept, and I don't think that's very fair. But it's the way to. It is the way of things. There are times, however, where your accent or dialect will make you difficult to be understood. There are people here who speak in a French accent dialect known as joual, and the way that they'll speak French can be so difficult to catch and understand, even though I've been listening to French my entire life, that it makes me feel foolish. So, your mileage may always vary. Such is the way of things. Do you have any other questions? Let me check the queue. We'll give people a chance to throw it in there, because I can always go back to the game of 20 questions in L5R. The thing that we were supposed to do at the beginning. But I really like answering questions off the cuff and from the audience, just because I feel like it's sort of like a built-in, well, somebody cares about this. So, by the way, if you are doing voices, keep water on hand. I know that tea is popular. There is a danger that if you are drinking something in order to soothe your vocal cords, the problem is you're doing damage to them and then numbing them so that you can't tell that you're doing continued damage. So just be careful of that, but also lubricating your vocal cords is a good idea. Water tends to be best for this. Denmark's lifting all restrictions. More power to Denmark. Hopefully that'll work out for you. I will admit, I am not a doctor. I am not a scientist. I am not an epidemiologist. So I don't really know how to comment on those sorts of things, because I do think that there are calculated risks that every place has to take, no matter what. But I also live in a place where COVID is a big deal, a big problem. And so, I have a different sight on it. So. The thing that I also will remind people when it comes to restrictions and things like that is, because one of the things that I've actually kind of really grappled with recently is there is another kind of something that we do have to watch out for. As much as people kind of scoff at, well, we have to keep the economy going. Well, we have to, we actually kind of do. Without the economy, we then can't pay for things like food, right? Like if as horrible as a disease is, if it makes it too difficult to conduct business, then you have other problems down the line, problems that can be just as disastrous in a lot of ways. But I don't know what the correct answers are. It's easy to play a game like SimCity or Civ, but who knows? I'll also say that in terms of countries like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, you have your own interdynamics that I cannot begin to completely comprehend. My father worked on a couple of films that specifically sort of dealt with some of the sort of cultural relevance in that region because they were co-productions. My father worked on films like The Danish Poet and My Grandmother Ironed the King's Shirts. Both things that I actually quite adore, but there's or Me and My Molten, which I also really enjoyed, but I'm afraid I've not visited any of the countries in that area of the world. So, I mean, also you can declare war all the time. Who knows? All right, let's have a look at this at these 20 questions here. Which king? What? What? At any rate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the 20 questions very quickly here. And then we're going to come back and we're going to start figuring out how we have to make some changes either to this sheet or to the setting itself in order to fit in. So when you're playing Legend of the Five Rings, if I actually go over specifically to the... Come here. If I go over actually to the book itself and I go to the game of 20 questions itself. So these questions make up how you create a character. It's in answering these questions that your sheet is initially laid out. After that, it becomes a point by XP system. So you can choose how to spend your experience where you want on the sheet to make changes as you will, with an interesting sort of facet of, as you are spending experience, you can rank up in terms of your school. But if you buy things that are specifically taught or emphasized by your school, you'll rank up faster compared to if you just buy whatever else you want. But it all still applies to a certain degree. So the first question, what clan does your character belong to? The plan in our game, I'm already getting ahead of myself. So what clan does your character belong to? Depending on the answer, you're going to get an increase in a ring. So rings are like attributes from World of Darkness or Storyteller System games. So instead of you having like a strength, dexterity, charisma, manipulation, appearance, stamina, perception, wits, intelligence, resolve, all those sorts of things, you have rings. The rings being air, wind, earth, fire, and void. Wait, air, wind, earth. Sorry, not wind. Air, water, earth, fire, void. And those specific kind of rings are approaches. So choosing your clan will give you an increase in a ring. It'll also give you a skill increase. So skills are like abilities in this game. And your status is determined here. Your status is one of the three sort of values that you kind of carry with you. Your honor, your glory, and your status are the values that your character kind of carries with you, that are sort of the abstraction to how your character sort of fits in samurai society. Our plan is to actually have these numbers matter in the context of the game because they're being tracked by AI. So, no, not like Sonic. I'm afraid not. So the turtle says, and I think this is this is a legitimate complaint. Although we'll see how we sort of feel about it here. I wish they wouldn't ask clan family in school so early. Wish they would put them later, letting your character define your clan, not your clan define your character. The game of 20 questions, I think the reason that they ask it this way is because your clan does make a difference to your character, but it doesn't necessarily decide all. I think the point is that none of these questions are meant to really sort of completely lock you into a choice. But heck, in D&D, the first question that they ask is, what's your class? And your class is a huge ramification over the rest of your character. So in a way, they ask about your clan right away. I would always let somebody go back and make changes if they needed to based on their thing. But also your clan determines what school you get to go to as well, so they kind of have to ask your clan first. So there are ways to sort of deal with these questions. So these clans come with descriptions. So this clan, for instance, if we look at the Crab Clan right away, at the southern border of Rokugan stands a grim miracle, the Caillou Wall, stretching like a great puckered scar along the landscape, its slate gray blocks fitted together seamlessly into a structure 30 feet thick and 100 feet tall. Use metric. To the south loom the blighted Shadowlands, the domain of the corrupted armies of Jigoku. To the north lie the lands of the Crab Clan, the Wall's crafters and defenders. The Crab Clan are known as guardians and warriors, slayers of monsters and protectors of the realm. Even those who do not fight with weapons often wage war with their minds and words, securing key supplies for their clan, maintaining alliances to guarantee support of the Wall, or engineering new technologies to turn back the endless hordes of the Shadowlands. However, the Crab Clan's task often weighs heavily upon the disciples of the Kamehida. They are known as taciturn, battle-weary, or even disillusioned. The glories of the battlefield are scant reward, and surviving to fight another day can seem its own punishment at times when facing such a relentless threat. Still, these people find ways to live and express themselves, and many revel in the small joys that life provides them. So, we have already a description here, but that description is for the original Crab Clan, right? We can't obviously have the Crab Clan act in the same way, but what we can do, if we swap over to here, is we can kind of make the key that the Crab Clan, they're defenders against monsters and spirits, right? If we specifically look at the Shadowlands, so not necessarily spirits specifically, but they're slayers, monsters, and spirits. So we already know that we need monsters, and we need the idea of a location where monsters try to attack, right? If we want to be able to maintain the feeling of Crab Clan, that's kind of what we have to have. That they're sort of, in a Game of Thrones sense, they're the Night's Watch. Right? They're standing against a presumed evil. Monsters we've already sort of come up with. These are rogue AI or mechs, right? So these are essentially robots that are bad. Think Horizon. So Horizon being the video game series, Horizon Zero Dawn, the upcoming Horizon Forbidden West, where a lot of the characters that you are dealing with, not characters, a lot of the mobs that you're dealing with are in fact mechanical creatures meant to sort of replicate creatures or dinosaurs. So we can still have that here. We can have the Crab Clan exists close to, and they defend against these AI who are trying to infiltrate and attack Rokugan itself. So we know that we can have that there. We don't really have to change a whole ton at this point. Beyond that, at least not when we're presenting it to the players, because they can fill in the blanks themselves here. We also know that they have certain things like you have awareness of politics. You can identify common Shadowlands creatures such as goblins, ogres, and zombies, and you know how to dispatch them. So in this case, you can identify those mechs, those AIs, those creatures. You grew up hearing stories and songs of heroes who faced greater evil still, such as Oni, but you likely have not encountered such horrors personally. Same deal. You know all too well the befouling taint of the Shadowlands and how best to avoid it, and you can recognize the advanced stages of this unnatural corruption. So what could this unnatural corruption be? The first thing that would come to mind if we're dealing with AI and we're dealing with computer programs, it seems to me like a virus or malware would be the thing that I would first sort of think of. They could also be, the equivalent of bloat in an operating system, although that's kind of less evocative, but ideas that we can use to come up with. And then we continue on with the rest of the clans. So Crane Clan very specifically are, they're more about courtesy. They know about politics between their lands, the state of political affairs between the clans, because they're very much about etiquette, protocol, dealing with the imperial capital. So we know that in order to keep this clan worthwhile, to make this clan keep their kind of flavor, we know that not only do we have to have the same kind of political structure, but we have to have an imperial center. And that imperial center doesn't necessarily have to be the same kind of imperial that we're thinking. Is this a corporation? Is this the government of Rokugan? Is it a crime syndicate? But whatever it is, it has to take the place of the Imperials in L5R specifically, which means that they have to be very powerful. And so what I would be doing in this particular case, as I was figuring out the rest of the game, is I'd be going through the clans like this. We can continue. Known for poetry, elegance, grace, mastery of social customs. None of this stuff needs to be changed. That stuff can all stay the same. We don't have to worry about that at all. I suppose I should go back here for Bushido for a second. Courage, don't need to change that. Courtesy, don't need to change that. I don't think Bushido is going to need a whole lot of changes at all. The Dragon Clan. In an empire that usually prizes conformity and respect for tradition, the Dragon Clan is an enigma. They place more emphasis on most of their fellow samurai in the individual search for enlightenment and expertise. So in the centuries since the Kami fell to Earth, this would be the singularity. So now we know for Dragon Clan, when we have the Kami fell to Earth, you can't see that on the side scroll. The Kami fell to Earth, this is the singularity. So that's when AI advanced beyond human control. Togashi's followers have acquired a reputation for strange behavior, isolated by the mountains of their northern home and entrusted with watching over the empire. The dragon rarely participate as actively in the politics of the empire as other clans do, and when they do intervene, it's often for reasons others can only guess at. The secret of the dragon is that they are guided by their founder's foresight, but even they do not always know what Togashi saw in his visions. So we've got esoteric practices, innate curiosity, tradition of disregarding tradition. Very little from here has to change, at least when people are looking at this to determine what they need to know when they're making their character, because we sort of get this. Like, their personality doesn't have to change. Like when the turtle said that Crab's known for being brutish and not caring about how to properly do things, yep, that doesn't have to change either. Kung Fu Fenris gives the suggestion here that it's a weird clan of programmers. So we already know that programmers in our universe, the idea of hacking or programming is the equivalent of magic. It's what the Shigenja would do. It's what the monks would do. So we do have to check, like, okay, if we say that they're programmers, then we're essentially saying that the Dragon Clan, is it appropriate for them to have greater sort of mysticism involved? And the answer is yes. But I'd also say that if a player came to me and said, so are they like a weird clan of programmers? my instinct would be to yes and that. So yes anding is a part of improv. It's the idea that if somebody makes you an offer, if somebody suggests a part of the story, your instinct, if at all possible, should be to accept that, to say yes. And then anding is to not only accept it, but then to build on it. So if somebody comes up to me and says, so are they like a weird clan of programmers? That sounds neat to me. I could be like, sure, yeah, they're absolutely a weird clan of programmers. The thing is that they're not necessarily as trusted by some of the other AI that are around because they are naturally distrustful of anybody who tries to manipulate them over much. But they kind of feel like they're harmless because they tend to not go with tradition a whole lot, right? Maybe they're feeling the matrix code, as Kung Fu Finisher says. Sure, all of that sounds like it could be interesting. Dragon Clan is sincerity, aligning one's words and deeds with one's intentions. No problem. But here's something that we might have to deal with. Due to the rugged nature of your homeland, you know how to properly prepare mountain flora and wildlife for human consumption. This isn't like a game-breaking ability that we're taking away, but Cyberpunk doesn't really have the whole like hunting for sustenance. So we may have to change this a little bit. We may have to sort of be that the Dragon Clan are more known to be able to scrounge up parts from places that more people don't have access to, right? Or, as Kung Fu Finisher says, they have a tradition for strange food. So there are things that we might have to look at. You know more about monastic life and traditions than most other clans, having likely interacted with the Togashi Order throughout your life. So in this particular case, yes, people know about the concept of hacking, or the concept of net running, or the concept of programming, right? And general aware of politics within Dragonlands, right? Like that seems to be pretty basic. Lion Clan. Every samurai who lives in Rokugan measures courage, honor, and duty by the standard set by the Lion Clan. The Lion's military is unrivaled as there are no sharper tacticians and no larger armies in all of Rokugan. This proud military heritage has earned the Lion Clan a place as the right hand of the Emperor, sworn to protect him by serving as his personal guard and his standing army. So, again, we have an indication of an emperor, of an imperial, right? That's important. In light of this duty, fear means nothing to Lion Samurai. The threat of death only serves to embolden them, bolster their courage. That's fine. The well-known battlefield warriors in the Emerald Empire. So this is another example of the Emerald Empire coming up. So if we go here and we go Lion Clan, we have Emerald Empire. Now, Empire isn't exactly something that we necessarily want to keep as part of a cyberpunk thing. It's this term that we don't really like. So we'd have to think of the Emerald what? And then we can come up with something later on that'll work out with that. So that also, not only is that going to help us keep the game kind of centered around the central tenets of the game, so we don't have to do less, we have to do less porting. It also means that people coming from the outside can understand a little easier because they can be like, oh, okay, well, it's not the Emerald Empire, but it's the Emerald Coalition. Fine, that makes sense. So the turtle, I understand that monastic does not equal servants. Did I say that? I didn't mean to make that implication. Monastic means monk, and monks don't serve the kami. Monks are often samurai who have retired, who live in contemplation as opposed to servitude. Moving on to Emerald Code. Maybe. The thing is, though, that the Emerald Empire are made up of humans, right? Like they're people. They're not kami. Who is the emperor in this? Exactly, right? So, like, who is the emperor? I'll add that in here. So, a head of state, head of corporation, because one of the things that we do know about cyberpunk is that oftentimes it's the idea is that late stage capitalism has propelled us to the point where it's no longer about governments and it's more about corporations ruling. I'm not sure that we're going to go along those lines, because the other thing is, these clans, are they corporations? I kind of don't know, and I don't think they are. I think that there's something different, but they might be, right? It's very possible that they are corporations. In which case, then the Emperor isn't really a corporation at all. Maybe it's the government that oversees these corporations and hires and uses these corporations, and that kind of helps. So, the turtle, it's totally fine. I'm asking because sometimes I misspeak, and also sometimes I'm just straight up wrong. I am wrong a lot. I am not the greatest person for that. Emperor could be mayor, absolutely. Phoenix Clan. The Phoenix is a symbol of contradictions, explosive power and great restraint, vast intelligence and deep humility, immolating self-sacrifice and glorious rebirth. These entwined virtues illuminate the path of Rokugan's most mystical great clan, the keepers of the Tao of Shinsei and caretakers of the Empire's soul. So, as previously brought up in chat, this is another clan that's going to be heavily involved with interaction or study of AI. Right? Because they are very, when we see concepts of spirits, we are talking about the cloud. We're talking about AI. We're talking about code, artificial intelligence. So, the Emperor has a kami given right to rule. Would that be something you carry over? Yes, absolutely. Because the kami do interact. One of the things to remember about Rokugan is that it's not that religion is a facet of life that people kind of have as a background. The kami are real, right? Like they're demonstrably real. They're not like the divine influences that you can see in our society today, where we do not have hard-edged definitive proof. Rokugan absolutely has these. So, is the Hante a super user selected by the AIs? I'm not sure that super user would be the correct term. A super user can can execute commands over programs, and I think the AI are beyond that. I don't think that they accept commands from anyone anymore, or if they do, it's out of amusement. I don't believe that humanity have the ability to manipulate AI in that respect. It's a distinction. So it's kind of an interesting question. How much can they actually use? How much interaction do they actually have? So, if we go back in here, sorry, I have a lot of windows open. Weirdness says, emperors are often divinely chosen individuals of a select family, so maybe it's a role or position that has direct access with the spirits and keeps the clans in check. But do they, in fact, have access? That is a good question, and obviously, it could be a story point. How much do they really have interaction with the AI that exist? But it's possible that they just have, they have greater access to the information that these things provide. So, yeah, and Kung Fu Fender says, because the original Hante was a kami. The first emperor, in fact, absolutely was an AI. So it could be that this AI very deliberately was like, okay, so I am setting up this human to be in charge because I don't really feel like doing it. So I'm going to set up with some lessons, some guidelines, and then I'm going to peace out, and I'm going to leave it to you to follow our own mystical ways. These are other things that we have to consider. But if we continue looking at the Phoenix clan itself, so we do have still mentions of things like ghosts are returned to slumber. Ghosts to me implies that you can upload consciousness elsewhere. Phoenix understand that even the purest wish can have an unintended and destructive consequences if the elements are brought out of balance. I think that's absolutely something that you can just kind of keep holding on to. make too many demands of an all-powerful AI, and they may end up turning on you in the end. Familiar with the religious practices of Rokugan, such as the rites practiced by various priesthoods, the invocations of Shigenja, the Tao of Shinsei, and even the traditions that existed before the Kami, such as the fortuitous tradition of the Isawa and the animist practices of the Yobanjin, who dwell in the Great Wall of the North Mountains. I think that this is essentially them saying that they're aware of when people were programming the AI instead. So they're aware of before the singularity. Righteousness, whatever. Bushido doesn't need a whole lot of change. So now we are on to Scorpion. With 6 terrible words, the kami Bayushi set his followers in the newly founded Scorpion clan on a dark and dangerous path. Enemies loomed beyond Rokugan's borders, but they also lurked within them. Bayushi swore to protect the Empire by any means necessary. Where the code of Bushido tied the Emperor's left and right hands, the courtiers of the Crane and the mighty legions of the Lion, the Emperor's underhand could still reach. To combat the liars, the thieves, and the traitors within the great clans, Bayushi's followers would have to lie, steal, and cheat in turn. The weapons of the Scorpion became blackmail, poison, and sabotage. The Scorpion dirtied their hands so that others could remain pure. Yet in spite of and perhaps because of the clan's fearsome reputation, there is none more loyal than a Scorpion. In a clan of deceivers and manipulators, trust is a hard-earned treasure to be cherished and guarded. Betrayal is punished with swift retribution, the souls of the treacherous forever bound into the horrific limbo of a place known as Traitor's Grove. Such fierce loyalty is a small consolation, at least, given the dangerous but vital role the Scorpion have played in the Empire from the moment their kami spoke his fateful words, "I will be your villain, Hante." Bayushi's successors are known for their insidious skill at scheming, but also the potential benefits of partnering with them. For without offering the proper incentives to their allies, some of the time they could never maintain their position as the great schemers of the Empire. People expect members of the Scorpion to be equal parts alluring and treacherous, and loyal only to the Emperor. So, I don't know how familiar people are with game theory. If you've heard of something called the Prisoner's Dilemma. The Prisoner's Dilemma is a game. It's a logic game whereby the concept is 2 people are arrested and separated from each other, and each being given the option to rat out the other one. If both people say nothing, they don't have any evidence to convict, and both people go free. If one person confesses and the other one does not, the person who confesses gets a lighter sentence and the other person gets a heavier sentence. But if both people confess, then both of them get heavy sentences. So what do you do knowing that they can't coordinate their responses? One of the things that's interesting about the Prisoner's Dilemma is that often AI are written in an attempt to solve for the best answers for these games, assuming that you're playing it 100, 1,000, a million times in a row. And they make choices based on what the other opponent is doing. Sometimes some AI just choose complete chance. I would say that the Scorpion clan is the AI's recognizance that they need to have somebody who isn't willing to play the prisoner's game perfectly, because the programs that often win are the ones that do not play with perfect accuracy, that don't play the optimal game. In fact, in this particular case, the optimal game is the one where you sometimes straight up betray or cheat everyone, knowing that it is for the greater good. So, the audio pitch, the turtle is not canon. It is not canon. It's very possible that it's been a long time since. I'm not certain where we're going to go with that. I haven't thought a whole lot about it. It was not my intention to sort of be like, this is about the initial start of this new reality, because then there wouldn't be things like established schools or established clans. So I don't think that that's going to happen. So the audio thing, I'll also point out, the audio thing I quite literally wrote in a minute, 10 minutes before we were going to go live on stream, and got people to record it, cut it, edited it, and threw it up there all within like the 6 minutes I had before we had to go on stream. So do not take that as canon. It was done very, very quickly. So it may very well change. So the Scorpion Clan, to me, is possible. It's a possible examination of game theory. And the idea that the AI understand that to be perfect is to leave yourself open and vulnerable. What do they know? General state of political affairs between the clans, fine. Substantial criminal cartels in the Emerald Empire, also fine. State of court matters in the Imperial capital, fine. Duty and loyalty, fine. Scorpion Clan doesn't need all that much to change. Then we have Unicorn Clan. So now here's where things get a little interesting, because the Unicorn Clan, as written, obviously this would absolutely not work if it was only 15 years later. 1,000 years ago, the Kirin clan rode out of Rokugan, seeking to discover enemies hiding beyond the Emerald Empire's borders. Their journey was arduous, and they found many strange and powerful threats. In defeating each one, the clan learned, changing its fighting styles, magical practices, and even philosophy. To survive, it was forced to adapt and overcome. After 8 centuries of wandering, the Clan of the Wind returned to the Empire as the Unicorn Clan. They wear fur, speak foreign tongues, and wield strange weapons. Although they still revere the kami Shinjo, they have drifted far from the traditions and ways of the Emerald Empire. Shinjo's descendants are known for their skill as riders, skirmishers, and messengers, and many are trained in foreign fighting techniques or schools of philosophy. People expect them to be worldly and gregarious, if perhaps a bit rough around the edges in polite Rokugani society, given that many members of the clan spend much of their lives ranging across the wilds in Unicorn Lands and beyond. So this is an interesting question. What do we do with the Unicorn Clan? Kung Fu Fenris throws out a very interesting option right off the bat, which is the concept of... Oh, it's a one-word answer, so I have to activate it here. Sorry, the featured chat doesn't like one-word answers. Marzicorn. So the idea that perhaps they are, in fact, people who left the planet and then came back. It's an interesting idea. One thing that we are going to have to sort of point out here is that if we've determined that there are what lies outside the world, it was Turtle as well. Oh, did Turtle mention it as well? Oh, there we go. Yep, there it is. Sorry, I totally missed it. There we go. Throw that up there. Don't want to we want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due. What does lie beyond the world? So this, if we're looking at Unicorn Clan, what lies beyond the world makes a difference because they're from there. So it's perhaps off-world. Mars? Is it that they lived outside Rokugan where AI perhaps went a little more ham against humanity? Sorry, the Turtle. I get it. I get a lot of people telling me a lot of things. I cannot keep track of them all. I do like the idea. How I would end up using it is another question, though. Because we have to determine why they left and also why they came back. Leaving to colonize somewhere else and then deciding to return, possibly because either they've heard that AI have changed things and that they want to... There's a detachment of these, those that left that then decide that they want to try their chances back at the old homestead. Maybe that's an idea. Maybe having New Rokugan being a world city is important, but were they led there by an AI? These are interesting questions. Shinjo was Kami, I believe. Yeah. Shinjo was the kami that sort of led the unicorn out. So that's something else that we have to determine. Where is outside Rokugan, and how does it matter? How does it make a difference? So those are the clans. Oh, all right. Well, Kung Fu Fender says something else here. So what family does your character belong to? All of these families are basically going to be valid. I don't think we need to make any specific changes to families. They're just going to have to be based on the changes that we make to accommodate the rest of the clans. So Crab Clan, for instance, the Caillou Wall needs to exist, but it's the same thing. The Caillou are responsible for the road network, supporting the fortifications, siege engines that crush and shatter the Shadowlands forces, defensive work spread across the interior. Like, all of these things are totally fine. I don't think we need to worry about making any specific changes to these. We can continue with character creation as normal. Remember that they do get skill increases and they do get ring increases depending on which family you've chosen. Great. No problem. Kung Fu Fenris says, maybe there was a pre-ascension immense ring of artificial gravity space stations in orbit of Rokugan and cut off from Rokugan. That's an interesting concept as well. You're talking about like a ring world, a halo, a Dyson sphere. Any of these things are potentially possible. And it does mean that there is a place that people can go. They could potentially leave and go to space. But space, I imagine, would be a lot different if AI suddenly decided that they wanted to shield themselves or cut themselves off from a space station. It would mean that they'd lost some of their support planet side and they'd have to become self-sufficient. And over time, that would mean that they would diverge culturally quite a bit. So I do think that that's a very interesting idea. So in our document here, we can suggest ring world, space station. Kung Fu Fenris mentions that in normal Legend of the Five Rings, you have the rest of the world as well, but they're cut off by the sea and the desert. It may be more interesting if people are cut off by this guy, right? Cut off by space. Especially if AI have essentially at this point strictly controlled the ability of humanity to create, orbital structures or to launch humanity into space. So, which makes a lot of sense. Today, you can't go and visit the International Space Station unless you are an astronaut, cosmonaut, or you're incredibly rich. So one thing that we do have to keep in mind as we go through this, these concepts, is that we do have like wealth. So immediately I'm wary of wealth because I don't like tracking currency. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But the way that I'm looking at wealth here is also just an indicator of, if you're part of the Agasha family, you are, you've got 4. The Kitsuki family has 6, which is twice as much as the Togashi order, which has 3. So then to me, that just sort of implies the Kitsuki family is, a lot richer than the Togashi order. So I don't have to worry about that. What are we calling family? I don't know yet. And we may just keep them as family. These could be divisions. If the clans end up being corporations, they could be divisions. But one thing that we are going to have to look at some point is the character sheet. And the reason why we got to look at the character sheet is because are there abilities that just don't apply, right? We've seen skills. Theology in this case would be, we can keep it as theology, but theology is essentially AI at this stage. Meditation, I think we can still totally keep. I don't mind a little mysticism to go along with things. Courtesy, design, these things are fine, but we just have to make sure, because one thing that I will point out is that seafaring and stuff like that, well, how much of that is still going to apply? Role in school. So what is your character's school and what roles does that school fall into? So here we have Bushi, courtiers, artisans, shigenja, monks, and shinobi. So we are going to have to decide whether we're going to keep these terms or not. It may be easier for us to keep the terms, especially if the kami are the ones who refer to them as such, great. Knowing that shugenja priests of the samurai caste who share a special bond with the kami, they're hackers, right? Monks nominally stand aside from society, but many samurai enter a monastic order. They do this in their old age, but some become monks much earlier. Monks have been known to wield considerable political influence. So maybe monks are a fine name for them. Maybe they are considered something else. Maybe they're considered programmers, right? I do know, the Turtle, that you're not supposed to actually deal with money, but money is a thing. You do track money in this game. So thankfully it is something that I was aware of early on, that I wasn't going to have it be a huge part of this experience, and I'm glad. Shinobi. It makes me wonder if other players going to select Shinobi or not. If somebody does choose to play a Shinobi, I wonder whether I will keep it a secret. Kung Fu Fenris mentioning about nanites and how meditation might be a way to clear the cache. Yep. I think that there are cybernetic implants that have been placed. I do think that people have the ability to have things like skulljacks or whatever that keep them sort of connected to the net to a certain degree. And I think meditation is a way for you to defrag for yourself. So you choose a single school within their clan for your character. These schools, I'm not sure that they're going to need a whole lot of changes, and I think that we may end up just keeping the names of all of the skills and katas and the various techniques. I don't think we need to change them. I think that we can keep them L5R themed. I don't think that necessarily has to bump too hard against the cyberpunk nature that we have. So if we move past role in school and we go into honor, how does your character stand out within their school? So I think all of this is still just fine. Who is your lord and what is your character's duty to them? So this kind of isolates one of the issues that we have to deal with in terms of this game. Our PCs are samurai, and samurai are essentially given a lot of privilege and a lot of prestige at the cost of the fact that they are serving their lords directly and indirectly serving those that their lords oversee. So in a way, are they vice presidents? Right? And this means that we have to figure out exactly the relationship between a samurai and a lord. And I do think that the more that I'm looking into this, the more that the idea that the different clans are in fact corporations that are trying to help keep this place together. And that samurai are sort of known as these people who are not just office drones. They have a certain amount of autonomy, but at the same time, they have lords that they have to answer to. They have to answer to their shareholders, right? So I do think that that's important to keep in mind. It is also possible, like for instance, monk characters who no longer belong to a clan. It's possible that monks don't belong to a clan. It's possible that monks do. I haven't ruled out the idea that the characters can be Ronin. In L5R, Ronin are clanless samurai. One thing that I did tell the players, though, is that my preference would be that they are either all Ronin or none of them are. I kind of don't want to get into the concept of some of them have clans and some of them don't, because that can shine too specific a spotlight on one particular character. Corp sponsored by the infrastructure left behind by the AIs? Yeah, probably. Samurai or corp police? I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I want to get into the idea that they're police, partially because, the concept of police right now is a little bit rocky in today's society, but also that, they're samurai who straight up spend all their time crafting art and playing political games, and that doesn't really make them police. I think it's very true that some of them might be, but I don't think the definition of samurai is police. I don't think we're quite there yet. Yes, there are minor clans that exist. So the minor clans are here. Badger, cat, centipede, dragonfly, falcon, fox, wasp, tortoise, sparrow, mantis, hare, and you can make up others. These are just smaller corporations, I would think. You know, corporations that have managed to eke out a place in society, even though they aren't major players. And you're right; they're not founded by these AI. That's not what their intentions were. One of the things that it also, if we have this taking place a significant amount of time after the singularity, things change and get muddled, right? The AI are not in constant contact. They're not overseeing these corporations themselves. So things can change, twist, mutate. All of that stuff's normal and fine, and we can handle that no problem. So the idea that there are minor clans are fine. I'm not particularly enamored with the idea of having a player play a member of a minor clan. Because I don't have as much experience in this setting or this system that I can feel comfortable being like, sure, we can just come up with a new school to create and all of that. So I don't think we're going to be encouraging that. So then we have Giri. So Giri are one of the two primary drives in the story. Giri is basically something that you have to do in service of your lord. So in this case, the service of the corporation that they serve, right? So Giri could be simple. It could just be like, we need you to defend. We need you to defend Rokugan against the mechs that threaten our borders, because that's part of the reason of why this entire corp exists. That's what Clan Corp is, right? Although I don't really know if I want to call it Crab Corp. Ooh. In case it isn't obvious, it's incredibly dry where I am right now. So in this particular case, the characters have to select something that is their duty. I wonder what the idea of proper Giri looks like in the cyberpunk setting, or maybe it doesn't need much changing. I don't know if it does. I don't know if it actually has that much of a difference, because the idea is that your duty, that your character has a duty, that your character may like their duty or may not, but that duty can bring you into conflict, right? If your lord has essentially told you to go out and make sure that, for me, your Giri, do they have examples here specifically? Is this Giri something you want to see your character pursue or contend with during the story? Can your character make progress towards completing this Giri no matter where the campaign takes your character? Which I think is a very good point, because it would suck if it's like, you have to stand your ass on this wall and make sure that nothing gets past it. It means that you can't ever leave the wall, so won't really help. And is this Giri likely to conflict with your ninja at least occasionally? So it could be, when you go out, I want you to advance Crab Clan's interests wherever you go in order to try to funnel back supplies and trade. Okay, great. But what if you personally don't agree with what Crab Clan is doing? Or what if some people are saying, well, these supplies were destined to something else, and you're like, but I agree with you that they should go somewhere else, but I'm also supposed to send things back to Crab Clan. So So, Giri, guard trade route between Unicorn and Lion lands for incursion by the Lion. Yeah. So, like, but what happens if you agree with what the Lion are doing? Or what happens if you don't want to be on the road all the time? So, these are things that the game kind of presents as, yes, you have a duty, but you don't necessarily always want to do that duty, or that duty may come in conflict with your ninjo. So ninjo is a challenge that you set before your character, force them to confront the ideals of Bushido and the cost to uphold them as they pursue their desire. Thus, it's related to their honor. Another way to look at ninjo is to ask yourself, what goal might tempt the character to disobey their lord or do other dishonorable things? What would be worth such risks to them? So there is a place where we can go back and look. Your ninjo could be as simple as, like, you know, I've always wanted to own my own house and garden. Well, you're not really supposed to crave your own personal wealth, right? Especially if you're going to be moving around a lot. So the idea that you are hoping to return home and tend to your garden can be a simple ninjo, but an effective one if it puts you in conflict with your giri. So, you know, there are ways here, but I don't think that either of these concepts need to be changed for the game itself. They're kind of timeless. I have my giri, I have a job, and I gotta do my job, and I have my ninja, where I basically don't want to do my job. No, that's not true. But, like, if my ninja is, I really like RPGClinic and I want to be able to put on the best stream that I can, I have to understand that at the same time, I have to work 40 hours a week. So what do I do with that? Do I slack off work in order to try to do better at this? Or do I realize that I have to put the hours in and therefore I don't get to work as much on RPGClinic as I'd like? Crab holdings. Oh, weirdness. Go for it. Damn. So selecting one's ninja properly, all of that stuff, same sort of thing. One thing that we are going to have to point out, though, is that we are going to have to discuss with the players how comfortable they are with the concepts that are outlined already in the book. As much as we're looking at a cyberpunk setting, a lot of this game is based on the idea that there are certain things that are honorable and certain things that are not. I want players to feel like they can have, love stories, for instance, but in the world of Rokugan, people don't necessarily get the chance to marry for love all that often. In fact, they very much often don't. Their marriage is a political action as opposed to an action made out of love. That doesn't mean that love doesn't exist, but ignoring your duty to marry as you should in order to pursue love, that would be like a concept of a ninja. But we have to check with the players as well, right? I don't want the players to kind of come to me as a unified front and say, well, we want to be free to not worry about marriage as one of the political aspects of this campaign, and for me to have built my first storyline entirely around the concept of arranged marriage. So it is something that we are going to have to look at, right? What is your character's relationship with their clan? Yep. I think this makes sense. I don't think we need to worry about that. Don't think we need to change. What does your character think of Bushido? This is a very important question, but the main reason why it changes a little bit in this particular case is that Bushido is something that Kami specifically pay attention to and care about. Your honor and your glory are tracked. And while they're not necessarily tracked perfectly, right? Like your honor, it's not like you can look at your wrist and be like, oh, I gained 1 honor today. At the same time, you know that Bushido exists and that there are powerful entities that give a shit about how you deal with those things. So this question becomes very important. And I think that it'll be really interesting to see what people say about this. The one thing that I know for some groups, yeah, it's a social credit score. Yeah, duty for desire. This is flashbacks to old Japanese film and anime. That's basically it. There you go. The crab zabatsu. Oh, there you go. One thing that I know about this game is that this game isn't necessarily going to do very well if we've got two characters, for instance, who are like, we understand and follow Bushido, even if we're not necessarily thrilled with it, or we are thrilled with it, and one person who's like, fuck Bushido, I don't care. If we have somebody who's just completely counterculture and decides that they don't want to engage with that aspect of the universe, it's not going to fit. It's the equivalent of having an adventuring party in D&D where two people are like, yes, we have to go save the captured prince. They might have different reasons for wanting to do so, but they both agree with it. And one person who's like, I just want to kill as many people as I possibly can until I'm taken down, right? Like, we do have to be aware of that. I'm not worried about that for Liz, Kate, or Scott, but it is something to bear in mind if you're planning on running L5R. You do need to have a certain amount of consensus, because counterculture and fuck the man is a very popular character type. People like feeling like they're standing against authority. And in this particular case, you're signing up for authority. You're signing up for it. And the game is about your struggle with that concept of authority and the concept of Bushido. And so it's not fun if you just abandon the struggle entirely right away, right? If you're just like, nope, not worth it. I don't care about it. And I don't care about the consequences. Well, then you've thrown out most of what this game is about. Have a good night, Ellie Spot. Yeah, even the Scorpion Clan isn't completely fuck Bushido. Absolutely not. They just understand that, you know, they may not get to have the benefit of being perfect in Bushido. Like, part of the sacrifice they make is they understand that Bushido is important, but they can't follow that code as easily. So that's a part of it. Strengths and weaknesses. What's your character's greatest accomplishment so far? Fantastic. Love it. What holds your character back the most in life? Also fantastic. Love it. What activity makes your character feel at peace? This is actually a really interesting question in a cyberpunk universe because of how often frenetic and cramped and packed a cyberpunk universe is. So I'm really interested to hear the answers for these. And this is where you can select things like passions, advantages, disadvantages, anxieties. These are things that we'll be able to check, and we may be able to create, because there are rules for creating customs. We'll be able to use those if somebody wants to create specific things that relate to a cyberpunk universe. So I don't think we have to worry about those things, but we will check those lists at some point to make sure that we're not going to run into major problems with the passions themselves. So we'll be sure to take a look at that soon. Actually, you know what? No, we'll just have a look. So, advantages. So, ambidexterity. Yeah, totally fine. Bishamon's Blessing. So these have types. So some of these are spiritual. So for instance, you recover from physical exhaustion twice as quickly as others when performing a check for which favor this fortune is a benefit, like a fitness water check to recover from exhaustion. These are nanites. These can be explained by nanites, right? So nanites, I think, are something that we'll be able to incorporate. Gods, how are we dealing with these? They're AI. The gods are AI. Because one of the things about the gods in L5R, as far as I can tell, is that they wield great power, but they are not completely omnipresent and omniscient. They don't have ultimate power. So that kind of tracks for us with AI. Admin AI who are a bit closer to the world? Yes. Right? Like, so there are individual kami who are not like the big kami, but they're just individual programs, individual AI that still exists, that still run. Blackmail. Blissful betrothal. So your spouse fulfills certain social duties in your name when you are absent. And when performing a check, yeah, see, this is just being married. This is all fine. I don't think we're going to have a problem with these at all. We go back to strengths and weaknesses. What concern, fear, or foible troubles your character the most? These would be anxieties. Not a problem. Who has your character learned the most from during their life? Yep. Totally fine. One thing that I will say, though, is that people probably will not be able to select a kami specifically. I think that kami are, they're remote. They don't talk to humans a whole lot. The singularity kind of means that they've moved past humanity in a large sense. So I don't think I want to get into the habit of this game that people can just regularly talk to every kind of kami that they come across at all times. I think that they'll get the chance to communicate with them sometimes, but I don't think that somebody like a kami will end up being somebody's mentor. But then again, your character might have even met a supernatural being who served as a guide or patron, or one who set a curse upon your character in exchange for giving your character power or as punishment for transgressions against the celestial order. So maybe that is a possibility. Maybe those are there. Personality and behavior. What do people first notice upon encountering your character? Great. No problem. How does your character react to stressful situations? Great. Strife is something that we're going to keep and hold. I don't think that's going to be a problem. What are your character's pre-existing relationships with other clans, families, organizations, and traditions? Same thing. How would your character's parents describe them? I love this question. And I think that this will be able to still work out well. Who is your character named to honor? It's just a name. Character's personal name, just a name. And how should your character die? So I'm going to focus specifically on this question, on the last question here. Not all supernatural kami, there are non-human sapients in L5R. That's true, but in the terms of what we're working with in terms of a cyberpunk universe, they're all going to be artificial intelligences. I don't want to start getting into there being different supernatural entities in the game itself too much. But there are different levels and different factions of AI. So it is possible that there are some who may disagree with the big AI who oversee, the ones that the corporations are attached to. Other AI don't necessarily subscribe to their situations. So Naga are just robots. So I have to kind of go over each individual one of the supernaturals, but they're my intention is not to have other supernatural creatures, because that isn't really what cyberpunk sort of entails, unless we're running Shadowrun, and we're not. So they may very well be something else, but I think a lot of that is also, it is not my intention to go through the entire book and figure out a replacement for everything. That would take too much time. And I think a lot of this is going to be stuff that we'll figure out as we go along. Weirdness saying just because they're a mentor doesn't mean that they're going to answer a call if they're busy. Sure, but Liz is playing a robot. Liz and I have to talk about that, but we have very specific kind of, I think Liz has a very specific goal that she wants to reach, a specific thing that she wants to try, and I want to enable her as best I can, but I don't want to close anything off until I know exactly what that is and how I can best help. Just because they're a mentor doesn't mean they're going to answer a call if they're busy. I don't want to give AI the reputation of being accessible to anyone at any time. So you're right. If they have they aren't always going to be available, but I also don't want to make it like, oh yeah, it's just common for people to talk to any AI they want. I think some AI are going to be extremely aloof. Is there an afterlife? I believe Kung Fu Fenris that in this particular case, the idea is that some level of consciousness can be uploaded to the cloud. And so there is perhaps a form of afterlife, an idea that your consciousness somehow may persist, but it isn't quite sure how or why, because they do not call back. Or at least not all that often. There's also the there was something else that I was thinking of, and I just sort of missed it. What was it that I was thinking of? If it comes back to me, it comes back to me. How should your character die? Oh, I remember. I'll get to it in a second. All proper samurai fully expect to die in the service of their lord, and it is said that every samurai lives at all times 3 feet from death. the length of a katana blade. However, some deaths have more meaning than others, and there are plenty of samurai whose outward facade of courage hides a deep-seated fear of mortality. How would you like your character to end? Will they fulfill their destiny and join their ancestors in Yomi, the realm of sacred ancestors, or in this case, the cloud? Or will their soul be forced to undertake another cycle on the celestial wheel of reincarnation? This has no mechanical implications, but you should keep it in mind. Your storyteller certainly will. An interesting question. My curiosity is this question one that I want openly answered or not? Is it a question that I might keep between me and the player without revealing it to the audience or the other players? I think there's kind of an argument for both, but I think that this is a great example of a way that you can kind of put forward the idea that players should have some agency over how their characters' stories end. Not always necessarily total agency, but it is something that I find interesting, because one of the things about L5R, and something that we are going to be discussing in our session 0, is the concept of death. Specifically, the concept of, and here I'm going to put a content warning for self-harm, the concept of suicide. There is the idea that if you have lost enough of your honor, you can redeem yourself by sacrificing your own life. No, it's not a set in stone death idea. I think that it's not so much for me, for you. Like, I think that your interpretation of how your character dreams to die is totally fine. My interpretation is how the player wants it. Because I think that that's another interesting question. So I personally recognize that suicide's kind of a tricky concept. A lot of people don't want to hear about it. There are people who also very specifically are like, well, there's a big difference between choosing to sacrifice your life for honor than choosing to end your life because of despair. But I'm not sure that I want to get into it. It is going to be something I'm going to discuss with players. One of the things that I have debated is that you can end your time as a samurai by pulling your skulljack out of your head. So the idea that you have a skulljack, your skulljack is it's a thing that you use in order to jack into networks. Perhaps training exists similar to like the Matrix, in that like once you've proven that your brain can take it, you can upload a new program to it and the like. So then the idea is that if you have eliminated your honor, you just pull the skulljack out of your head. The problem is that not only does that remove the training that you've been given, it can screw with your memory as well. So in essence, you have to live with the idea that you were once great and that you will never be great again. You cannot get a skulljack reimplanted. You cannot be a samurai again, and you cannot ever receive the training that you once did. So in essence, you have ended your life. Yeah, you become a person like the people out there, like a banality changeling in CTD. Yeah, basically you become a half person or a no person. You are not dead, but your life is effectively gone, and you have to deal with shattered memories and shattered expectations. So I like that as an idea, because it means that you can still very much be like, I have to renounce a large part of who I am. And in effect, it is ending your current life to go on to something else. But, hey, Brisinga. It is, to me, an idea that, yes, there is a functional way to end somebody's, to end your own life. And maybe you even, perhaps if you've done it for a good reason, you may even live the rest of your life knowing, like, I was a samurai once. I remember that I did something interesting or neat, but I can't find out what it is anymore because no one will tell me. But I have a feeling like it was something good, right? So the idea of mind upload should exist in this conversation somewhere. Yep. I think that mind upload is a very fascinating concept. I like the idea because I would tie it in with ghosts and spirits. I like the idea that maybe you upload your mind. Maybe it's a privilege that you're granted if you serve well. Maybe it's something that, so that it is a thing that I absolutely want to look into. Let's see here. Turtle says that L5R also tried to separate the idea of honorable suicide because it's also kind of disrespectful of the cultures because it makes it seem like it was a really common thing. Yeah, it is a thing. And I'll also point out that remember that a lot of these writings of the concept of like Bushido and of what people assumed samurai were like and all that, it was fiction. It wasn't reality. But we don't want to imply that people just run around killing themselves willy-nilly. We do want to make sure that we are respectful of things. So that's kind of why I'm thinking about the Skulljack and having that be a specific kind of notion. Or if it's not specifically a skulljack, like if it's not necessarily a hole in the back of your head, it is something that you can extract. It's when I say that it's sensationalized, I mean that it's fiction. To me, a lot of fiction is based in reality, but it's still fiction. I know that at that point we're discussing semantics here, but like the concept of these things were not nearly as based in reality as people think they are. But they were still, they still had ties to reality. Whoa. Okay. Hey, we got to the end. We got to the end of the 20 questions and we got to the end of the stream. How about that? I guess we got lucky. There's been a lot of interesting things kind of thrown in here. So you can see that when I go through a book to see elements that I might have to change or house rule, oftentimes character creation is the first place I look because it's the place where players get attached to the ideas of their characters. It is really hard sometimes because I'm the one who sanctions characters in Disconcordia, our Changeling 24/7 game. And it's really tough to have somebody come in and they're like, here's the character sheet that I have. I am really attached to some of the things on this sheet. Rarely is somebody attached to everything. Often people don't really care about but I really wanted to have 0 dots in science. Oftentimes people don't care. But it's really tough sometimes when you have somebody who's like, oh, I saw the availability of this power and I really wanted this power. And then if I have to be the one to tell them, we won't let you have that power. I know the book says you can have it, but we can't let you have it. It's very disappointing. It's offering something to somebody because it's in the book and then taking it away before they get a chance to play with it. And it's rough. So I often go through character creation first because I want to see if there's any trips, any traps, any, anything that I'm going to run up against and realize, fuck, this is going to make things harder than I wanted it to. All I wanted was to have a cool magical guitar, but see, Kung Fu Fenderson made that happen. And it's a cool magical guitar. But in looking through this, I haven't found anything here where I'm like, oh, fuck, I definitely don't want this. And that's good. I am going to have to keep going through the book. I am going to have to keep looking at things. There will be things that I miss. There will be things that will only come together in collaboration with the players. But at least we have that option. And if we are indeed paying attention to character creation, then the rest of it will become easier as time goes on. Tomorrow, I believe there is still Punch Effect over at twitch.tv/Elizabeth A. Neal. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Saturday, Drew Crew, hopefully, Doomed. Sunday, we're going to have another one-shot. As much as as I don't have an announcement for what that one-shot will be at, it will be on Discord. Oh, no, I do. I do know what the one-shot is. Ha! I do know what the one-shot is, but I don't know if I want to be the one to reveal it. I have a feeling like it's going to be interesting. I'm not running it, which I think is also going to be fun. One of the players is going to run it. Oh, do it? All right. I didn't realize Kate was here. Kate will be running Goosefellas, a one-page RPG. So at least it's a very short RPG. I think there might be 2 pages. Goosefellas, the concept of geese as criminals. The goose is loose. Look, if I get to play a character who has a stat known as honk points, I am fucking in. I mean, there's a goose behind this green screen right now, waiting for this game. So, Goosefellas, it looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. A game suggested that I think is going to be just like, it's going to be a hoot or a honk in this particular case. So that's going to be Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember that we are this year bumping our Sunday streams 1 hour earlier, partially because we just got a lot of gosh darn Europeans that we really like. Peace was never an option. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of you. Honestly, if you're not a part of our Discord, hop on. It'll be fun. Enjoy it. Gosh darn Europeans. Oh yeah. Gosh darn Europeans. So join the Discord. You can find out information about the rest of our streams, talk to us, all of that stuff. But I'm hopefully people are getting more and more excited about this concept of us smashing L5R and Cyberpunk together in a very specific fashion. It's an experiment for us. We're not sure it'll work out, but we know that we're going to have fun trying. And that's kind of the important thing for us. We don't have to succeed in everything, but we do want to make sure that we have fun along the way. So if you're having fun along the way, we definitely want to hear that. And if you're not, we also want to hear that because we kind of care about all of it. But no matter what, folks, thanks for tuning in. And remember that as hard as it is, as absolutely painful as it can be, your best bet, if you are experiencing trouble in your RPGs or in life, is often just to use your damn word hole. We'll see you next time.